Oh, Christmas tree, how lovely are thy branches. Oh, Christmas tree, how lovely are thy branches. Your boughs so green in summertime, stay bravely green in wintertime. Oh, Tannenbaum, oh, Christmas tree, how lovely are thy branches. Oh, Christmas tree, welcome to the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. Are we rolling, Control?
It's saying it's preparing. So as it's preparing and I press this go live button.
I should have brought a saxophone out here.
It is now live on Facebook. So welcome everyone. CIA's Christmas stories, star stories for all of you for this solstice season. My name's Julija, Agent 12. We haven't been doing a live for a while now, so it's time to sort of wrap up, well, not the year quite yet, because we'll probably do more looking into 2019 next week, but we are very happy to have a few fabulous agents with us today. Two other agents from Melbourne, Stephanie Johnson and Olga Morales, and the wonderful Agent 1123, Gemini Brett, all the way in California. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here with you amazingly powerful women on the other side of the world in the future.
Thank you, mate. That's why we invite you. No.
I can tell you how it used to be.
Yeah, right. Well, it's just a very impromptu kind of gathering for us because there's so much going on. I know today the EA astrologers have a vast amount of astrologers meeting online for their kind of 2019 look-in. I'll put all the links down for us after this. We have also tomorrow an NPA astrology, the new paradigm team meeting to also talk about into 2019. So the CIA, our tradition has always been to gather for the solstices and equinoxes to talk about the astrology of the moment or the next 3 months, so to speak. But today we're actually going to concentrate more on these fabulous stories of the sky that actually denote this time of year. Some of you would know some of them, and some of you, it may be very new to you. But what we do know about the solstice, when the sun moves to the cardinal point of 0 Capricorn, it denotes the passage or the journey of the sun to its most southern position, and that's summer in the southern hemisphere. And then it begins its journey. It stands still for 3 days and rises after 3 days to rebirth as the sun then begins to move north. So that story sounds familiar, doesn't it? And we will get into a bit of that, but having gathered the agents, we have got a bit of an issue with Agent 33 with her sound, so we hope that gets resolved very soon. But let me introduce the ones that we have got sound for now. Stephanie Johnson, Agent 88, is, many of you would know, a Melbourne astrologer, very active in the community down here with the CIA and her own work as one of the founding, developers of Solarfire, and now very, very, probably more importantly now for what you do with Astro Gold, which is a software many of us love. So we will tell you more about it as well. And Agent 1123, who many of you already know because he is amazing storytelling stories. And he did a video just a few weeks ago or a week ago about this that we've gathered for you to present for the CIA today. And Agent 33, Olga Morales.
Hello.
Very well. Oh, here she is. Olga.
Hey, we hear you.
No, I'm set up with 2 computers.
All right. Well, look this way.
So my PC doesn't have a webcam. My laptop has a webcam,
Okay, well, look at the
As
one
long
with
as
the
you're on.
camera. There you
Fabulous.
go.
Oh my God.
Perfect.
Yeah, good on you, Olga. I'm glad. So, Agent 33, I'm just introducing you. So, Agent 33 is also an amazing astrologer. Been doing astrology for a long time, and her specialty is cosmobiology and working with financial astrology and in the big world of financial astrologers, teaching them about your expertise. So, welcome, Olga. Welcome, Agent 1123, and welcome, Agent 88. So what we're going to start with today is we've all got different segments to do. We're going to start with Agent 88, Steph Johnson, who is going to talk to us about a few interesting things to do with the birth chart of Jesus and a few other things. Over to you, Agent 88. You will share your screen.
Thank you. Thank you. I know that we're going to be talking a lot about solstice, but this time of the year for me is always pretty magical because it's Christmas. Now, we know Christmas is December 25th, and I may be speaking to the converted, some of you, but we know that the early Christian church obviously did not, Jesus was not born on December 25th. It was actually not until about, I think AD 440 when the church decided to celebrate December 25th, and it was really based on the celebration of Saturnalia. So it is in some ways, I think, really lovely that it's tied in with the solstice. But I wanted to talk about it today because we people around the world are singing, you know, Star of Wonder, Star So Bright. We have stars on top of our Christmas tree, and I think Agent 1123 might talk a little bit about that. I saw a wonderful thing on Facebook the other day about Rudolph, hoping you're going to share that. But I want to talk about the actual Star of Bethlehem. Where did this come from? Now, we know only really in the Bible. I think it's Matthew. Matthew says, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. Now, the other New Testaments that have been included in the other books of the New Testament that have been included don't mention this. It's Matthew who does. Now, most people, I think, would agree that the wise men are astrologers. Some people do dispute that, but I like to think of the Magi or the astrologers as being wise men. But what was the Star of the East? And this is something that I was looking into a long time ago, and every Christmas I kind of go, oh, wow, let's have a look at this again. And there are different people who talk about different things. So what some people say, it was the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus. Some say Jupiter and Saturn. Some talk about comets. So I just wanted to touch on some of these things, because what happens is, again, we have AD and BC, or, you know, people these days also say BCE if you're not Christian. And I do acknowledge that I've had a very theological background. So not everybody shares that, and I really respect and honour everybody's beliefs, you know, as however we move forward in our own personal spiritual journey. Like most people, many people, I react to the politics of the religious Orthodox religion, but if you go into the theology, there's some real wisdom and magic in it. And it's really only been in more modern times where astrology, magic, alchemy was separated out from the church anyway. But just going back to what I was saying, Christ wasn't born on December the 25th, and he wasn't born in BC probably. So we need to look at these stars or these planets, these signs. And one of the things that I also think is important is we have the most amazing things these days, don't we? You know, the Hubble telescope. I love the little Juno that goes scooting, you know, around Jupiter, and we're seeing these amazingly beautiful images of Jupiter at the moment. Back then it was the naked eye, really. And so we need to sort of put ourselves back in that time and say, what would they have seen? And this is what various astrologers have done. You know, what was seen? Now, there's obviously a lot of research and probably a little bit of guesswork, I would say, which is not to denigrate people's, you know, hard research, but when you see the conflicting dates, which I'm going to come up with for the possible birth of Christ, you'll see that there are, as I said, some people think Jupiter, Venus. When did these things happen? The other thing that you can do if you're actually wanting to look at, well, when was Jesus actually born, is you can scoot forward if you like to, he clearly passed away, was crucified when he was 33. So, and there was clearly some sort of a solar eclipse in the crucifixion because it said darkness came over everybody. And to me, that's got to be an eclipse. So there's a lot of, backing and forth. And now some people, obviously, the religious communities talk about Jesus as being the Son of God. That's, something that if you're taking a dispassionate view, is disputable. But I think that most historians, based on Josephus, I think they say that Jesus of Nazareth really did live and he did die by crucifixion. This is supported by early historians like Josephus. But, and there's got to have been something quite extraordinary that happened because his followers were willing to be tortured and suffer torture and death for the truth of what they'd seen. So we are talking about and also look what's happened since then. It's just taken off around the world. Christianity is this huge thing, and it's branched off into, which is typical of us humans, into different kind of religious denominations. So I thought today we would look at just some of the charts for the different astrologers have come up for Jesus, and then obviously you'll be going back to looking at solstice and things like that. So I share my screen now? Okay. So
yes, go for it.
Okay, so just sharing my screen. You'll see here I've got a list of charts that have got here Jesus. I've put the names next to them. Many years ago I tried to have a little play myself. But I'm going to start with one that Pamela Crane actually has a book out, and she is quite an astrologer in the UK, and she has probably done arguably the most extensive research on this chart. I'm not saying it's necessarily my favourite, but she has combined, Pamela, for those of you who are maybe in the know astrologically, is a great proponent of the draconic zodiac. So she's combined in her research the heliocentric, the draconic, the geocentric or tropical, and the sidereal. She's looked at all four different charts, and she has come up with the Jupiter-Venus conjunction, and we see here 7th of May, 5 BC, based in Bethlehem, 6:43:55 p.m. And this is her idea of, or her research has pointed to this chart as being the possible one. Now, what astrologers do when they also look at the chart of Jesus is they look at the symbolism. And personally, I would like to see Pisces somewhere, being the whole fisher of men, the whole the washing of the feet. There's a lot of symbolism in there, and I think that later Gemini Brett will probably go through some more of the constellations and the things that were actually around at the time as well, not just the planets. I think from memory it's Aldebaran that was also pretty prominent at that time, so that may account for some of the symbolism as well. There's an astrologer in Australia called Roland McCleary, who many years ago gave me this information. He calls it the Joshua chart. And he's got it for the 15th of September in 7 BC. So let me just click out of that. And I'm not sure where some of these other ones are, but you're getting the idea of we're not actually looking at 1 BC or 0 BC. There's a few others here, and a lot of them do centre around 7 BC because what we have then, of course, is, as you'll see in this one that I've highlighted at the moment, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. That is one of the most popular theories about what the wise men saw in the east. It was quite visible, and we had another Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, I think it was in August 2016, which again from Israel was quite visible as a bright star in the east, 2 planets obviously. So this is one of the more popular ones. Now, I'm not a follower of Noel Tyl, but he does have this chart here, and I do like this one because it's got all of that Pisces in it, and it does have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And I think also, I kind of like it. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but many years ago when I was studying esoteric astrology, I heard that many great masters are born into the world are born on the 1st of March. And so I kind of thought, oh, I don't know if that's why Noel did his chart like this, but I thought that was kind of cool. I also like the Sag rising because really what a great teacher Jesus of Nazareth was, using parables and stories to get his point across. And that Mars up on the mid-heaven, he certainly fought against the Pharisees, the rules that have become rules without any compassion, the Virgo kind of extreme, if you like.
88, can I just ask something about that chart? With all that Pisces there, all the planets are, as we'd say, under the sun's beam. So Jupiter and Saturn would not have been visible as, you know, the star or the bright star that they would have been following if this was the chart. This is how we can decipher a few things as well. So this Pisces chart has everything under the sun's beam, so to speak.
That's true. Yeah.
Good on ya.
Good on me. See what I've learned?
Yeah.
True. Yeah, so the other ones that you were looking at anyway, that's what I'd be looking at. I mean, again, how these stories are so true or correct anyway. We decipher them with astrology.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of that. I just looked at the 1:21 a.m. and yeah, you're absolutely right. So we're kind of going back maybe to Pamela Cranes. As I said, she's done all 4 different zodiacs, so that's pretty impressive. She's also written a book on this, which I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's certainly available, you know, on the net. But she also talks about the Jupiter-Sun conjunction in Taurus as being something that she, you know, really believes in as well for this chart. This is something that she's almost spent, if you like. What do they call that when it's like your life's work, a magnum opus or something like that? So, but yes, so basically, this is the sort of thing that I just think is fascinating at this time of the year. We obviously look at you know, there are some people who say, well, why even wonder or why bother about it? Why not just keep the mystery and the beauty of the whole season? Whether it's, you know, the solstice, Christmas, I think Hanukkah was not that long ago, you know, let's keep the rituals and everything and the magic of that. There's also, you know, comets were, I think Halley's Comet was discovered and was still visible, I think, until about, and I may be wrong here, but about 12 BC. So, you know, there are all sorts of things that that could have been you know, attributed to this star of the east. You know, personally, I'm just going to keep singing the carols. I think I love it. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was, you know, we have politics always, don't we? And back in the ancient church, you know, really these 3 wise men, yes, they were probably magi and astrologers, but Herod sent them out. And some of them, you know, there's some arguments too that they didn't actually even follow the star. They followed some of the prophecies of Isaiah. So, and found Jesus that way, if you like. I think, though, that Herod did send them out, and I think that Herod did send them out, and probably he sent them out not for very altruistic reasons. He sent them out for it's Christmas and it's Christmas holidays. He sent them out for, you know, political reasons, because he wanted to get rid of anybody who was a threat or I'm talking about distractions, yeah, he wanted to, obviously get rid of all the little boys, so and then not have a threat. So there were political reasons behind it as well. But it's certainly fascinating, isn't it? All of this history, and also the strong links that were had with the night sky, which we can certainly, work to get back into our lives. I think it'll be a wonderful way to offset some of the social media and madness of today's society. Anyway, that's it from me for the moment.
Thank you, Steph. Yeah, it'd be good to look at those charts in a lot more, let's say, detail.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants me to send them to them, I can do that. They can just email me.
Mm-hmm. We'll put up all the links to all the agents involved today, to your websites and emails and stuff in the thread. Meaning, well, hopefully in both. Steph, in the chat box, send it to the people on the webinar platform, perhaps when you get off. So can you just stop sharing your screen, please, now?
Yeah, I just got to work out how to do that. Sorry.
It's just at the bottom, the little button again saying stop. I think I can override it.
Yeah, override it.
I think. You are reading.
Just can't get the big screen back up. Sorry.
Yes,
hang on.
okay.
Here we go. Stop share. I've got it.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so now, over to you, Olga, while we've got you there. Zoom would like to control this computer. I don't know what's going on there. I'm getting messages. So, Olga, do you know how to screenshot? Oh, hang on. Who was next? Agent 20.
I think Olga's good if she's
Olga's
ready. Yeah, if it works. Yeah,
all right. Olga, so down the bottom is the little share screen icon. Can you share?
Can we hear her?
Hello?
Yes,
Yay.
yes. Fabulous.
Okay.
Hang on now. All right. Thanks, Olga. It's coming on.
Yep.
So Olga's got some fascinating star stories for us. Over to you.
Is it loading? Okay. No, but I want to go.
Yep, we can see it.
Sorry, I just want to get to the front. Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Can
everything's good. Yes, we can see your screen. We can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I'm on. I can't believe it. Okay. All right. So this is a little bit different to what Steph's been presenting about Jesus. I want to look at the phenomena of the solar, the solstices, coming from more ancient civilizations, way before Christianity. And here we have the winter solstice sunrise at Karnak. Now, Karnak in Egypt, it's one of the biggest temples complexes in Egypt. And for me, when I went there in November, it was the most, I felt the strongest energy in this temple. Obviously, for me, I felt that I'd lived there. I'd had a past life there. But the alignment is exactly the main axis lines up with the sunrise on the winter solstice. And this was a celebration for the ancient Egyptians when the sun, or the saviour, was returning after it'd been in the underworld. Well, it'd been in the underworld since it went in from the autumn equinox, when it goes into the underworld, and it lays 3 days in the grave, like we know the story of Jesus as well. And then it comes and it rises. And this was a celebration of the new light. Now, in Egypt, it was completely different. We've got to think of these myths as well. generating from different parts of the world because we've got different latitudes and different things were happening. But for Egypt, in December, opposite to in July, we had in July with the rising of Sirius before the sun, which is a heliacal rising, the Nile would flood, and that was celebrated as their new year. 6 months later, basically it was drying out, so there's a lot of, it was more like drought. So for them, December was a time of more sort of desperation. So the fact that the sun was rising and they knew that it was going to get higher and higher every day, that was a celebration of the Saviour, so that a return of the new light. And so this is a lot to do with initiations too. So they were doing a lot of initiations at these times. And the same thing at Stonehenge. So this is a winter solstice sunrise at Stonehenge. So I've been to both. I haven't seen the winter solstice, I've only seen the summer solstice, but still the alignments are there. Why did these ancient people honour these the seasons? Because it was basically the angles of the anchors of the earth. I mean, Brett will describe it more, but it was a time when they knew that the sun would be at its lowest point and then rising again after 3 days, okay, moving northward. Okay, so they would be basically out of their darkness. So it's the return of the Saviour. And this is Newgrange Island, exactly built for the winter solstice sunrise. So you can imagine how many people are going to be there tomorrow. Apparently you can only get in by lottery because it's such a small space, but you can see that once the sun rises at the solstice, it goes right down the centre of it and illuminates the inner sanctum. So this is where ritual was done. Ritual was done, initiations. Now you've got to remember that a lot of these sites, there was the mystery schools, and they were into initiation rites, and it was all to do about the light inside us and also the illumination of the light outside us. So the initiate would go into these dark tombs or caves, like I've been in Egypt, like I went to in Tintagel, and then they'd wait for the light to rise and then they would be illuminated, and it was like a living resurrection. That's what they were waiting for. So you can understand why once the Christians came, they wanted power, they took over all the ancient pagan, if you want to call them. Pagan means of the earth and nature. They took over all their rights and converted it into their own. Basically, it's just the same thing, but they've just changed it to modify it to their own, I suppose, wanting to control the masses, okay? So, and that's where Christmas comes from. Think of the word Christmas. Anyway, let's keep going. So, I know Brett will get into this more, but I just want to show you a picture of basically what the sun does. And this is the phenomena because our Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees. Now, apparently that has not always been the case. Okay, now some people have argued that 2000 BC, a meteor hit the Earth and actually put us off our axis a little bit now. But the fact that we're at plus 23.5 at the moment, I know that oscillates over millions of years. It has been higher and lower over time. But everything on Earth has mutated to this angle, like the seasons. Everything grows to these seasons. Now, if that wasn't there, it would be like spring all the time for nearly everybody in a way. So, people may not think about, why do we have the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn on our maps? Okay, it's the highest point. So when the sun, we go into the 21st of March and the sun hits the equator, it's in the sign of Aries, the ram, and that's really was the beginning of the year. Okay, and then we go at 90 degrees later, or 90 days later, we get to Cancer. And that's the 21st of June, and that's when the sun hits its highest declination. So this sine wave is basically what the sun does. If you're watching the sun every day like the ancients would have been doing, that's what they would be seeing moving across the sky. And then once it hits, and then we start going down when it hits on the 21st of September in the sign of Libra, it goes below the equator, and this is the fall, our autumn, okay? And now we go right down. When it hits the southern declination, which is minus 23.5, we're in the sign of Capricorn. Where are we heading in the next, well, tomorrow, okay? And this was the dead of winter. When I'm talking about the Northern Hemisphere, most of our myths, everything in the Bible is obviously written in the Northern Hemisphere. They didn't know about Australia. But obviously the native Australians, the Aboriginals, they have their own myths according to the way they saw what was happening, and the stars are completely different. So let's have a look at, I'm going to always bring in WD Gam because, believe it or not, all these seasons and mid-seasons have an impact on the cycles of the stock market, just the same as it has influences on nature. Now, Gann always talks about natural law. Now, W.D. Gann, for people who don't know, he was a stock market trader but also an astrologer. And one of his teachings is that you need to look at these seasonal dates and also the mid-seasons that are in between, because it's natural law. Everything sort of moves in this way. And this is, for an example, I've put this up. This is the natural annual cycle of the S&P 500. And you can see the quarters, how the market does react. This is a composite of the reactions over many, many cycles, and it does have a pattern. And it's interesting because you can see that, when it hits Libra, which is the autumn equinox, okay, which is really the fall, when we go into Libra, and you can see that it does really fall into this period. Now, we know that the sign of Scorpio is always a dead zone. Everything dies in that period, but it's interesting that the market does the same thing, and that's when we're in our bear phase. Okay, so there's a lot of symbolism, and when we're in the bull phase, which is when the sun is in Taurus, there's a bull. So the bulls are up here, and the bears are in here. So it's very symbolic. So here is a map, an ancient map with the sine wave going through the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. They're known as the hinges of the earth. And you know what I love also? That if you think of Cancer's ruled by the moon, and it's really much to do with the womb, its fertility, whereas Capricorn is ruled by Capricorn, and that's really the tomb. So we go from the womb to the tomb, and you can see the symbolism. I'm very much into the Bible, but more from an esoteric point of view. I believe the Bible is just allegory. It's not real in terms of these people weren't real people. They were just representing astrological and celestial phenomena, and the high priests of the time, they had to make up stories. They weren't giving away the real message. They wanted you to decipher it. So everything's put in myth and solar myths, right? That's the way I see it. So let's have a look at this. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with every moment and every day the ancients were looking at, and there's going to be more light or less light. It's always the conflict between, or the balance, the balance between light and dark. Okay, so we can see that here with the vernal equinox, which is spring, and then light slowly recedes, or it's a maximum when we get to that's the wrong way. I'm supposed to go upwards. So we've got the equinox here and the full sun when we get to the summer solstice, still quite hot, and then it sort of recedes. And then when we get to winter, it's the full darkness. So this is more the winter, and this is the summer solstice. So we've got the Cancer-Capricorn axis is very much to do with not equal, whereas when the vernal equinox and the autumn equinox is when night and day are equal on both sides of the hemisphere. So this is big conflicting energy here. So for us in Australia, we're actually getting our longest day, and for the Northern Hemisphere, getting their shortest day. So it's very much the yin and yang symbol. That symbolises exactly what we're going through right at the moment. And here you can see beautiful, I love these old maps. You can see exactly what it looks like on the solar, the energy between light and dark on the different hemispheres and different seasons. So this is something I've put up that I teach my traders, because they want to know why GAN was so focused on the seasonal periods in trading. And you have to look at the symbolism here. Like when we are at the east and we've got the sunrise or the spring or the equinox, the sun's rising, it's the east point. Or the stars rise at the east, okay? And in Egypt, the planet, the newborn light or newborn sun is Horus. Now, Horus was the young boy, and if you think of the word Horus, that's where we get the word horizon from. So Horus rises on the horizon. And the sun rising to its northern declination, we've got 90 days, or a quarter. Once it hits its highest declination, which is the summer solstice, when it hits that, it's the sun's in its immaturity, and he's called Ra. So Ra is the mature sun, or on the midheaven. Now Ra, think of all the words we get from Ra: radiance, radial. Think of them. They all come from Ra, which is the sun. Okay? So that's when it hits Cancer. Now, after that, it moves down. Once it's hit Cancer, it's hit its highest point. It actually stands still for 3 days. This is where we get 3 days. Solstice means sol, stationary. 3 days, it stays at the same declination. Then it starts coming down again. And we get to the autumn equinox, okay, which is the west, which is sunset, or the autumn equinox. Now, I've put in the fall of man into the state of darkness through the underworld. So what happens here? We got in Egypt, there was the evil brother of Horus, was Set. Set wanted to kill him all the time. Well, of course, where do we get the sun? We get the sunset comes from Set. Okay, so Set kills his younger brother when he goes into the west, goes into darkness. So we get into Scorpio. Obviously, we know that's the time of death, and then it's moving to its lowest declination when we get into Capricorn, where we are at the moment. And this is a winter solstice for the northern hemisphere, and the god of the underworld was Osiris. Okay, so here we have 4 supposedly different gods, but actually they're just aspects of the sun, the way it's culminating, rising, culminating, setting, and anti-culminating. And so the same thing as Jesus. Jesus is a solar hero, like a lot of them born around this time, supposedly born on the 25th of December, because they're actually solar myths. So you can see that the sun dies for 3 days at the winter solstice to be born again, and it starts a journey northbound again. So here I've put a little chart up about the truth in the stars, which I put up every year. And if you cast a chart at midnight, now remember, our ancient astrologers were actually watching the stars at night. They weren't really looking at the sun. You can't see anything against the sun in the day. So it was very much after sunset. That's when their observations took place. So a lot of the stories are actually nighttime stories. So at midnight on the 25th of December, if you cast a chart, you'll have 3 degrees of Capricorn will be down here. Okay, so it's moved 3 degrees into, and that's the 3 days that it's spent in the grave or in the tomb or in the nativity scene, okay, before it's released again. And then in the opposite side, you've got the brightest star, which is Sirius. Now, Sirius, as I explained before, in Cancer, was the most it's the brightest star in the heavens, but also the most respected or worshipped star in Egypt, because it heralded the flooding of the Nile, and the Nile needed to be flooded because it was their way of survival. They needed it to flood because it would bring down all this really fertile silt from the wherever it came from, and they were able to grow whatever they needed for the year ahead. Okay, so now if you look at it, there are 3 Orions on the side right next to it. Now, people argue that the 3 Magi, or the stars that they were looking through, were actually the 3 stars in Orion's belt. So this happens all the time. It's not just one event, okay? So if you put a star, we put stars, I believe the star we put on our Christmas tree is actually from Sirius, because I believe most of our myths and stories come from Egypt. And the tree is actually the Milky Way. Well, the whole backbone of our galaxy is the Milky Way, with all the millions of stars that have been born there every day. And Jesus was said to be born of a virgin. Now, if you look at the chart, if you see where Virgo is pretty much rising at this midnight point. And there's Virgo here. So the stars of Cancer also have something called, a cluster called the manger, where Jesus was said to be born. So this is all the symbolism, because people argue this is dead of winter. You're not going to have baby animals just hanging around in a manger, okay? So this is where the church has taken an ancient pagan, if you want to call it, time of year and just put their own little bent on it. So if we look at where the Bethlehem comes from, the actual Hebrew word, it actually means the house of bread. So Beth means house and Lehem means bread. So Virgo, in her hand, she holds a stalk of wheat. You can see it here. And all the pictures, even in Dendara and the Zodiac, which is quite old, you can see the Virgin with holding wheat in her hand. And in that point, there's also the Alpha Star Spiker. So here is another story about Away in the Manger. We can see that, I love that, all our carols and hymns that we sing at Easter, actually not just Easter and Christmas, they actually are quite esoteric in a way, because away in the manger, no crib for a bed, a little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head. The stars in the bright sky looked down where he lay, little Lord Jesus asleep in the hay. So at midnight again, culminating, as I said before, is Cancer. And the middle of the star is a manger. Now, Cancer was also always considered the gate of men, through which souls descend into the earth plane, whereas Capricorn was the gate of the gods, whereby souls ascend back to heaven. And Cancer and Capricorn are the hinges of the earth. Now, the Masonic, I put Masonic law into it because the Masons, a lot of their rituals that they do actually all link back to Egypt, okay? And all these points in the calendar, they had their own rituals. Now, the Masons, they love St. John the Baptist was said to be born on the 24th of June, opposite to Jesus on the 25th of December. Now, what are the odds of that happening? Okay, so Away in the Manger, there's a beehive. Now, a lot of Masonic law has a beehive. There's beehives everywhere. There's a lot to do with this beehive constellation in Cancer. And in Latin, it's called Praesepe. I think that's how you pronounce it. But and it actually means manger or a crib. Now, I know it to be in Italian because I'm Italian heritage, and we called the nativity scene Presepio, which is exactly the same thing. But on either side, there are two donkeys, and in the manger is baby Jesus. So the story is symbolic of the culmination of these stars. When the winter solstice and the sun, is actually the sun, was born again in the manger. And another thing, just to finish off, soon after they visited by the Magi, an angel appeared to Joseph in a dream, telling him to flee to Egypt. And Mary and Jesus would be, since King Herod would seek to kill him. Okay, this is what Steph was talking about. So if you look at this as a symbolic tale, and you're thinking the priests are making up stories to actually hide the astrological or celestial phenomena that they're actually describing, they're actually putting behind those stories very esoteric knowledge. So the survival of the infant, if you think of Jesus as the son, the newborn son, like Horus, he's been born in the dead of winter, which has got a likelihood of not surviving, okay? And on 21st of December, the sun enters the zodiac sign of Capricorn, the goat, ruled by Saturn, is the father of old age and time. Now, Saturn is actually Satan, is the devil with a cloven hoofs. That we always see that imagery of him with those hoofs. Now, King Herod, if you look at this symbolically, this story represents Saturn, the ruler of darkness and cold, the enemy of a newborn light. So the battle is always one of light and darkness at this time of year. Okay, so the stories in the Bible, any time you hear of a twin or an evil brother or sister killing someone, or an old king killing someone, trying to dominate through the new, an old kingdom, a new kingdom. So as I said before, in Egypt, the winter solstice was associated with drought. as the Nile flooded when the heliacal rising was serious in July and the drying out in December. So everything really much of the stories is to do what was happening to them in a nature-bound way or agricultural, and it was all to do with survival. And if the sun was not shining down, obviously things don't grow. And so that's where the stories are. And so waiting for that sun to start rising again, it was a massive celebration because they knew that they would have the light again for things to grow and they would be getting out of the winter. So anyway, that's my take. So hopefully you like that.
Thank you, Olga.
I didn't get any interruptions, so yeah.
Thank you for that. Wow, bringing all of that together, hey? Good on you.
Yeah, I've got a lot more, but anyway.
I know we could do many hours on this. We do what we can to put it together, and as I get the agents together, I say, yeah, 15 minutes. Oh, that's plenty of time. Never is. So, Olga, would you mind stopping sharing your screen? At the bottom there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, at the top there for yourself. Okay. There you go. Now we're calling agent 1123. Are you there? Are you there? He's got to be here he is.
Present. Present. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Wonderful, Olga. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
We'll keep going for now. We can tie up the stories, later. But fascinating stuff. Thanks, Olga. Over to you, 1123.
Okie doke. Salutations, everyone. Season's greetings. Get into the Christmas star mysteries. First, maybe this is the greatest mystery of the holiday, of the solstice seasons in our day and age, how consumerism Christmas has become the thing. And how it starts earlier and earlier every year. And now we have this Black Friday situation. It's such a trip, And where did it really start? I mean, I really love this image. And, I guess I should just issue what is it called? A spoiler warning. Hey, Olga, could you please mute your microphone? So parents, if you have kids, you can just hit mute on the screen. I think on your other computer, Olga, because your other computer is the one that's got the sound going. So folks, if you've got kids who are living in the wonderful mystery of the season, this is a good time to just shut your computer, because I'm going to get into some of where did this guy come from? And it's fascinating now that when I talk to kids about what solstice means and then what Christmas means, the first story you get to is Santa Claus, right? This is a much older image of Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, who is a saint, right? And it's an interesting study. We can take this back to Saturnalia in Rome. We can take it to the Nordic countries. This is maybe a little bit more of an image of Saint Nick that people are used to in our day and age. And here's that donkey that Olga was just talking about, right? The Christmas donkeys, and kind of tying into the nativity scene, Asilius Australis, Asilius Borealis, these great stars of the heavens, and Praesepe in the honeybee cluster. And so, this is more of a modern image, right? These flying reindeer bringing us maybe to more of the Nordic traditions. So an old image here of people lining up to, speak to Santa, which is just such a trip. I did a podcast some time ago with my friend Maria Stark. You can find at my website at morethan-astrology.com on the homepage. There's the storytelling podcast episodes. It's been a while, but we have one that's called, I think, the Santa Pause. And it was a lot of kind of comedy routine until we got into, oops, let me stop this share for a second. Until we got into it. And, I was just like, what's up with this trip? What's up with this myth? I was really kind of comparing, as the true Scorpio that I am, this Christmas, in a sense, deception to the overall just veil over humanity's eyes, and how this thing that's happening to children is happening to all of us on a larger scale, which is basically the weave of consumerism Christmas, even to blind us from the true essence of the turning of the seasons, and on a larger context, the turning of the ages. Because joy, jolly, wonderful, gift-giving, ancient traditions at this time, I mean, some of that is because, at least from a Northern Hemisphere perspective, making it through the cold of winter. Like literally, how would you honor someone given the truth that they might die? You know, and how can we honor life? And the evergreen tree, of course, this amazing symbol I love in the English version of O Tannenbaum, O Christmas Tree. I was just singing a little bit of that. I don't know if it made the recording, but how it's like how you courageously stay green through winter. And this is this very beautiful thing. So when I speak to like kids in my family about the solstice mysteries, and I really want to get into the tree and the world tree and the Christ, but it all starts with Santa. And so I figure I better start with Santa. So, you know, to me, it's very fascinating that we have this Santa mythos. And I think that when I was speaking with Maria about this, about how, you know, is this some great deception? You know, I mean, that feeling that I think kids have when they're awakened to a different reality, having been told this wonderful story of magic and this North Pole jolly elf flying around and delivering presents all around the world to those who are nice. And so we get a little bit of the don't be naughty, be nice, and you get the reward of things that you want, and go sit on this guy's lap in the mall and tell him what you want. You know, like that's weird. All right. But Maria in this conversation really helped remind me, as she was reading a lot of Ken Wilber at the time, and the truth that not only humans and individual beings, but like civilizations and species need to go through a mythic part of their life and their young life. And you might know Steiner and the Waldorf schools, like you're not even meant to really teach letters and numbers until 7 years old, which is very interesting. We astrologers know is Saturn age, right? Saturn square Saturn coming around that time. But to live mythically, to live in the fairy stories, how important this is. And I think I'll get, well, you know, I'll just share this now. So I've kind of looking at, well, how brutal it is for people to realize that they've been lied to in general. You know, I mean, I think a lot of us are having those experiences as we're coming into our own mystic reality and realizing that the world is not what we were told it wasn't, and not what we were told it was. And that there's something in that. There's something in this pain of finding out about the bunny and the tooth fairy and these things that is really tricky, because, you know, those who we most trust, in a sense, really deceived us and gave us this magic. So what's most important to me is that kids have an opportunity not only to express maybe some of the pain that they feel there. I mean, I'll say that when I'm looking at the eldest of my sister's kids, it was really easy for her, and I see this as well, because she's the eldest, and therefore when she found out, she just got to jump to the other side, and suddenly she was initiated in the sense like as an adult, right? And she got to keep the mystery alive and be on that part of that other team in a sense. And I find that's wonderful. But I've spoken to my community a lot with like, well, how can we keep magic alive? How can we say, well, maybe that first tale you heard isn't exactly true, but now that you know this, you're ready for the true mysteries and level them up, you know, kind of like secret society style. Obviously, I don't want to model everything there, but to find a way to utilize this great mythos of our time to teach, as I am obsessed in teaching, the marriage of heaven and earth, the great mysteries of the sky and the starry stories. And so I'll just share another example of my community that a friend shared, and that what he does is like, when the kid found out, he says, okay, cool. Now you are ready to be initiated as a Santa. And this is what being a Santa means. It means bringing gifts and spreading joy, like even when you don't know somebody, you know? And so what they do is like, they go on this like Christmas Eve ninja mission where they pick somebody in the neighborhood who needs a gift and what would be a great gift for them. And then they go out like guerrilla style in the middle of the night and leave a gift. And in this case, for this guy specifically, his son decided that this kind of like grudgy old woman down the street really needed some slippers because she goes out and gets the paper in the winter cold every morning. And so they delivered these slippers and then kind of hid behind a bush as she unwrapped these slippers from no one, unmarked. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. But for me, it's like, well, how can I actually utilize this story, keep it alive, and bring it into what I call the second level of the Christmas mystery? So we'll get ahead of that a little bit and then really look into that. So back here, I mean, I think this is, again, just an image suggesting like, this thing's kind of weird, right? And this is even weirder. This is like some of the Nordic lands, especially the Netherlands, Saint Nick, and who's called Zwarte Piet or Black Pete, and obviously very resistant in our day just for the apparent racism, and I've sat with like, what is this? You can look at, search Black Pete online and you'll find out about it if this isn't something that you've seen before. You'll see Saint Nick here much more of like a Catholic kind of saint looking thing in the shepherd's crook, right? But that he's rolling around with people in blackface, like this is terrible. And something, however, reminds me of maybe how it's bringing it back in the Nordic countries to this, who's Woden or Odin, right? Who brought us the runes and who had these two black ravens who traveled the world. Because in this story, it's Zwarte Piet who's the one who goes out and basically like spies on kids for Saint Nick to tell him whether they're naughty or nice. And in a sense, that was happening with Woden and the two great ravens, human and woman. And, Woden said to sit in council with 12 high priests. So this number 12 obviously is something that really excites we astrologers. 12 Olympian gods and goddesses, 12 knights of the round table, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples of the Christ, right? One of them who is named Didymus Thomas. Now Didymus means twins. Thomas means twins. In other words, this is the disciple that we call Gemini, right? And so here's the Christ who says he is the Son of man, let's say the Son of human and the Son of God, hanging out with 12 apostles. I mean, when we look at the Bible astrologically, amazing things are revealed. And that's, at the core of that story. Here's an image of the Christ at Chartres Cathedral in France. And something that's often pointed to is you see him pointing to the angel here, the eagle, the lion, the bull, the four fixed signs of Aquarius, Scorpio represented by the eagle Aquila for the Northern Hemisphere that co-rises with the scorpion, the bull, Taurus, the lion, Leo. Interestingly, out of order here, and I'd have to take a long time to show you why I believe that is from a star seen from a couple thousand years ago. But it's very important to say that, in some traditions, like in the pagan traditions, it's those signs, it's what we consider to be the middle of the seasons now, halfway between equinox and solstice, or solstice and equinox, the cross quarters where the seasons actually began. And those are celebrated by such things like the Maypole, May Day, traditionally Beltane. And that maypole is something that we're going to get back to. So here's another image from Chartres. You can see in the very outer arc, not only interesting images of mushrooms like trees in the lower left, and some of you have probably come across like the idea that many of the Christmas stories relate to psychedelic mushroom shamanism, and that picking the mushrooms and hanging them in trees to let them dry, and hanging them in stockings over the fire to let them dry, and coming in the chimney because in Siberia the front door is snowed in at this time of year, and that the shamans would dress like these Amanita muscaria red and white mushrooms, and that's where Santa Claus comes from. I mean, you can check that out if you'd like. It's a very interesting trip. I mean, the imagery of mushrooms with the Christ in the day are fascinating. But here we see these 12 on the outside. If you look kind of just to the right at the top here, you'll see twins together and a scorpion below that. And so the Scorpio side of me really wants to get into the esoteric, and eventually the Christmas mysteries of my map lead there. But at first I'd like to keep it Gemini and really keep it light, right? Because eventually we want to talk about this. We want to talk about how this virgin son born in a manger at December solstice time is very much indicative of beings who came before, like Horus, as Olga was mentioning, Dionysus, Krishna, Mithra. I think the first Zeitgeist movie does a pretty good job of like illuminating this a little bit, but it's something you really want to research because people have questioned some of their facts. But I think this slide comes from there, at least from somebody who watched that film. But, Mithras is a very amazing image. I mean, this was like the dominant consensus religion before the emperors went Christian. And that wasn't too long ago, right? So the Mithras image, you'll see this in the Tauroctomy very often, it's called, where Mithras is literally stabbing the bull, right, where the Pleiades live in the sky. And I just want to flash this image for the Career Astrologer, OPA's magazine, which you can find at opaastrology.org. It's free. It comes out for the equinoxes and solstices. This year I've been writing an Astronomy for Astrologers column, and I'm really working on images like this, which is a seemingly like a description of shifting from the age of the bull to the age of the ram, right? Through the precession of the equinoxes, the astrological ages, the great months, right? And so people often look to, well, Moses as a shepherd king slaying 3,000 people for worshiping a golden calf. That's a description of the shift from the ages of the bull to the age of the ram. And that Jesus, who was born the Son of God, but the good shepherd, a lamb of God, and taught his disciples to be fisher of men, is speaking of the shift from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces, which we are in. And he spoke, for the last Passover when his disciples asked, he said, find the man bearing the pitcher of water, go into the house in which he entereth in, and go upstairs, right? It really seems to be a foreshadowing of the age of Aquarius. And that's what my article for this month is mostly about, is this turning of the ages mysteries. But for the Christmas star mysteries, and to kind of keep it light, where I'm going is looking at, well, where can Santa Claus live in the sky? And Julija is going to tell us another image that I love in a second, because her image walks very close to the land, at least in the northern hemisphere. Olga spoke about the star on the top of the tree, perhaps being Sirius, this great star that in Kemet or in Egypt was associated with Sothis, with Isis, with the mother, the virgin mother of Horus, right? So why do we put lights on the tree in the first place? And for a star being like myself, it's not just to honor frost, it's really about stars, right? And to think about like tree worship and this evergreen worship, especially when it's the depth of winter, brings us back to many of the pagan roots. And Yggdrasil, the world tree. So world tree shows up in so many different traditions. I mean, there was an old tradition of decorating trees that were actually out in the forest, which I love, because it's weird that we cut a tree down to worship it, but this star on top of the world tree, for me, and how I teach my students always when we get out under the sky, we have to learn a little astronomy, friends. So the world tree would be what I love to call the spine of Gaia, our spin axis, the axis of our primary motion. If this season you're sitting around a table with family members and they're like that weird astrology thing, and you feel like getting into it. For me, I've chosen to infiltrate the old scene. I feel that it's more entertaining. But for me, the greatest proof of astrology. What's that?
I said that's a good agent.
Yeah, you got to spy a little, right? Like, this is where I'm coming from. Let's remember what it is to be square. Like, it's almost more interesting. But the greatest proof of astrology is this. You say, how do you feel at 3 p.m. versus how do you feel at 3 a.m.? And nobody honestly can say that that's not a different vibe, right? The primary motion is the spinning of Earth. So the primary astronomical happening should be the primary astrological happening. This is astrology. That we feel different at 3 a.m. versus 3 p.m. This is an energetic effect of astronomical happenings. And it's undeniable. And it's shorter. It's one day, like even before we get to the tides of the moons and that, yeah? So the primary motion is the spinning of the Earth. And we celebrate it astrologically by honoring the houses, right? Where the signs are about the secondary motion. So one of the poles points north and one of the poles points south, right? The pole emanates from the heart of our planet and moves through the terrestrial North Pole to the terrestrial celestial North Pole, and true for the south as well. The North Pole of Earth is always leaning towards 0 degrees tropical Cancer. Our tropical zodiac is very much a function of the cardinal directions. South Pole always leading towards 0 degrees tropical Capricorn, the solstice points. And the Christmas mysteries that I teach, they lead there. This is the important thing, right? The turning of the seasons, the great cross of matter inside the circle of spirit, the earth glyph, right? The medicine wheel. And the Christ mysteries really bring us there, Christ on the cross, which is true not only for the seasons of the year, but also the great seasons, and especially in our time with the solstices aligned to the galactic cross, which is what I wrote about in that article I mentioned before and probably will at the end. But to bring it in honor of the Santa part as an entrance to the sky mysteries, the star on top of the tree would very much in my world be, because I live in the northern hemisphere, be the North Star. The pole star, Polaris, which for me is why Santa is said to be from the North Pole. And so if you know the sky, the Northern Hemisphere sky, you'll know we're looking north here because you can see Great Bear, Ursa Major, and the asterism, which we call the Big Dipper, which used to be the wain, the wagon, pointing to Polaris, the tail star of the Little Bear, Ursa Major, or the Little Dipper. And it's the pole star because our pole points there. And so as Earth spins to the primary motion, Earth spins west to east, which we notice is the heavens moving east to west. And in the northern direction, that is this counterclockwise spin. And so here's Polaris at the top of the world tree, at the top of Yggdrasil. And as the world spins, everything will spin around this north celestial pole, which is marked in red there. And in our day and age, this star, Polaris, North Star, Beta, Alpha Ursa Minor is so close, right? So the whole tree is spinning about that star. And for me, therefore, it is the star on the top of the tree of these shiny lights that we call stars. So what about this character, who goes all around the world in one day delivering toys? So I have to turn him around here, take some of that blue away, bend the deer a little bit, and we'll see that he very much can fit with this wagon, the wain, the sleigh, and that this team of deer then would be the arc of the stars on the Big Dipper's handle and the first arc in the herdsman, which leads to a very bright red star called Arcturus, a super giant star, a very powerful star if you know Arcturus. And so we need a deer with a red nose to lead the sleigh, and this would be Rudolph. And so I'm not necessarily suggesting that this is where the Santa mysteries originate, although I'm not saying it isn't. But what I'm saying is that I am utilizing that Santa story to educate kids about the night sky. And so I'll bring them out after this shift happens for them, and they say, well, that's all, that's not true, whatever. I say, well, but it is true. It's just not what you were taught it was. That's the level to help introduce you to the tale and let me show you the story in the sky. And we work this for a while. And I teach them about the North Star, and I teach them about how the sky spins, and that's going to help me lead them back to the importance of the solstice and of the equinoxes, where then I can introduce that true mystery of Christ as the sun and bring in these changing of the seasons and help them learn their directions, because in the Northern Hemisphere, if you know North Star, then you know where you're going. You know the other directions too. So there's Santa's sleigh in the sky, and we'll just see that during the course of one day and every day, Santa, led by the red-nosed Rudolph and his train of deer, goes all around the world. And to the Southern Hemisphere too. So I want to say this, Polaris, North Star, won't keep those nicknames forever, right? Because there is a third motion of Earth. The first is our spin. The second is our orbit. The first bringing houses, the second bringing signs. And the third is the precessional motion, right? That the North Star, the South Star shifts over time. There's currently not a South Star, but that's not always true. And it's a great 24 to 26,000 year cycle. I write about it a bit in this article I mentioned for OPA that's coming out around solstice time. These are the North Stars over time. Currently Polaris, our next one will be a star in Cephas. And these are South Pole stars over time. So currently there's no South Pole star. It's tricky to find the South Celestial Pole, but great South Hemisphere wizards like the powerful women on the channel with us today know how to do this. But in about 4,000 years, when North Star shifts to Iri in the King constellation, then down south it will be a star of the chameleon. I think that a lot of the South Hemisphere constellations need to be reclaimed with Southern Hemisphere cosmology. So then we get to azimuth, antitia, solstices, equinoxes. You know, for me, that's like actually the mysteries level 3. And then we bring in the Christ thing. And I'm Christian as much as I follow the astrology, the solstices and the equinoxes is my way. So I understand we'll speak a bit about that later. So just another image from the coming article of the 3 different major philosophies, sidereal, constellational, and tropical, of the astrological kind of contemplation wisdom today, and how this brings us into the galactic cross and the turning of the ages, and something that I think is very important. So I hope you'll go over to morethan.astrology.com. That's my website that you see here. And eventually I will link this article in OPA when it comes out very soon. But you'll also find a retreat that's happening in January. So if you're looking to escape the winter, you Northern Hemispherians, or feel a little bit more of it, you Southern Hemispherians, meet Maurice Fernandez and Onur Dosa and Nadia Shah and Ursula Stockter and I in Mayan lands in the Yucatan, Mexico, in the end of January, beginning of February, where we will celebrate the triple conjunction of Sagittarius, Moon, Venus, and Jupiter. So we'll get back to that later, but thank you so much for letting me spend some time into the Christmas star mysteries, and starting maybe with some of the deeper mysteries, but also keeping it light and just saying, hey, let's keep Santa alive. Let's just utilize that great story to bring it to the starry essence of the heavens.
Thank you. 1123. We love your stories.
My treat.
I mean, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? And there's so many levels. Like, I'm sure people out there are watching and going, you know, like, okay, I've got this bit, but there's another level, and there's depth out there. Yeah, there's so much depth to all the turnings that we're in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me just say this in your own way, in your own medicine, whatever you have found, let's make sure that when the big reveal goes down for kids, they don't lose magic along with it. So we utilize that as a way to bring them into a higher level of magic. And we do that throughout their lives.
I think you should write a kid's book, a children's visual book on Christmas story that you've just shown there. Imagine starting them off early to understand these things, you know, infiltrating.
Yeah, I just see like kids running around like Santa's sleigh.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So let's see another image of that, Julija.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, we're running a bit late. Whatever. It's Christmas. We got more time to give. So I'm glad you explained just before the 3 zodiacs that we kind of live in: the tropical zodiac, the sidereal zodiac, which is also divided 30 degrees into the sky, and the constellational zodiac. So it's a very important part of doing visual astrology, is to understand the difference between those 3 zodiacs. So we're not going to get into it too much today, but part of what I'm looking at today and showing us all is to do with the real sky astrology, so to speak, that I did some research on a while ago, and I'll explain as I go. So it all has to do with the constellation of Scorpio. Now, most of us recognize Scorpio in the sky because it's a vast constellation. And, you know, in Australia, when it rises, this is actually the Northern Hemisphere view of how you'd see it, you know, kind of rising from left to right or from east to west. And in the Southern Hemisphere, we see it like that. So, you know, recognizing the difference, this is the 2 hemispheres now, that understanding, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're looking at the constellations of around the ecliptic, which are the zodiac signs, and constellations from the left-hand view, and then the southern hemisphere, we're looking at it from the right. So, you know, as they would meet together, and it's, of course, the same thing. So just to be aware of that as we're talking. And again, this is really also very important to understand what's happening in the sky. Like, astrology has got so many theories and meanings, and, you know, where do they come from? They do have a basis with star stories that started a long, long time ago. And so what I'm going to bring you...
Julija?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you go back one slide?
Yes.
So on the left, if you flip that vertically as well, so the stinger is
Like
pointing up towards the top of the sky, which I think might be a little more slayish. So people do that because that's our northern.
Okay, but yeah, that would be when it's up on the midheaven, yeah? Like 12
Yeah, well, it rises that way. The claws first, and then it walks on the land and dives deep. So we always have the hook bit kind of go flipped over it. So if we take the left and just flip it that way, that's how Scorpio.
It's got to flip that way. Okay, sorry, I've got it mixed up. Anyway, it's it's along those lines. But if you've got what do you call it? Software, Stellarium. Is it Stellarium? That's a really good way to see how these look. Now, what I'm showing you today is just to get another story of the visual astrology and the meanings of this time of year and the solstice. And they come from... My heritage is Lithuanian, and I read a book years ago that was given to me by an astrologer from Lithuanian. It was in Lithuanian. It was a big test for me to read it, and I've always wanted to translate it or parts of it. I'm just going to show you today. But it's called Reading the Heavenly Signs. Heaven and the sky is the same word in Lithuanian, dangus. And it's following the Lithuanian zodiac, which was mainly what he's looking at was from a 12th century bowl that he found, and then of course the stories that go much later into that by Jonas Vaiškūnas, who actually runs a cosmology museum in Lithuania that I went to years ago. Anyway, so I'm looking back now around 1200 where this book is based from. And we can see this is the closest sort of rising of the sun to the solstice, okay, so the Capricorn solstice. And what he tells us about is that the sign of Scorpio was the sign that was heliacally rising at the time of the solstice. And as we can see, the midheaven points there to Scorpio. And so Scorpio was the herald of the coming of Christmas. And if we look back at you know, this Scorpio image, and perhaps it is flipped like Gemini said it should be, you can see that it does look like a sleigh. Okay, and it is like a sleigh, but actually what the Lithuanian zodiac calls Scorpio is the reindeer antlers. Okay, so it's the reindeer. So as well as the sleigh, it also represents the reindeer antlers that are rising at the time of the sun solstice Capricorn, at sunrise. It's the heliacally rising sign. So the myths or the stories of Scorpio are, being the antler, is that it brings the sun back. It's actually, the sun has now disappeared for 6 weeks until we see, you know, the coming of the Scorpio just rising just before sunrise. And it had disappeared for 6 weeks while the sun has been in Sagittarius. And apparently Sagittarius is the human that actually forges the sun back to life. So it's kind of been burnt in, you know, in the big flame of Sagittarius in the time before its rebirth. And the Scorpio symbolism of the deer in Lithuania was very, very similar to what we understand as Scorpio. It was known as the cosmic deer, and it had very much to do with the deer and the departed and the afterlife and the time in between heaven and earth. And it was a representative of the battle of the light and the dark and bringing back the light. So, so what I've put on here now is, again, I've put the tropical zodiac in the inside and what we call the sidereal zodiac on the outside, so that we can see exactly where the constellations are, in a sense, on the outside. Also, although this sidereal zodiac on the outside is only segregated by 30-degree increments, whereas the constellational zodiac is, for instance, Virgo is a huge constellation and takes up about 45 degrees of the sky, and Aries is somewhat small, and Pisces is big. So it's not relational to what the constellations look like out there, but again, something to be very, very aware of. So as we can see here, we now, I'm just going back to, this is now 2018, and we can see that the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac are 5 degrees apart. 25 degrees apart, so nearly completely overlapped on each other's signs. And that 25 degrees division, separation between the tropical and sidereal is what you need to understand when we're talking about, the sun being at 0 degrees of Capricorn, but it actually looks like it's at the beginning of the sign of the constellation of Sagittarius in the sky. What am I saying here? And just having said that, when I looked at the tropicals, the zodiac in Lithuania back in 1200, you can see the difference there. Scorpio is no longer so high in the sky. It's almost like Libra is taking over the constellation. So Scorpio, the coming of the reindeer and the reindeer horns, is a lot lower in the sky because time has moved on from these stories, but the stories remain. So just to, so we can be very aware of those. And in many, many cultures, the heliacal rising, as we call it, or the heliacal setting of a constellation constellation or a star, was the most kind of the revered time of, as Olga was saying about the heliacal rise of Sirius and the floods in Egypt, heralding a particular time of what's coming. So you might, look at Scorpio a little bit differently, and what's happening at the moment for the solstice. This is a solstice chart now. I've just aligned it with 0 Aries. But what we want to look at now is we've got this great conjunction of Mercury and Jupiter for the solstice at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. Now, where they are going to be aligned in actually the sky, in the morning sky, they are going to rise before, or be visible before the sunrise, and they will be found in the stars of Scorpio. So I think it's a bit of a mission for most of us to go and have a look at Jupiter and Venus. I mean, Venus will she be visible still? Gemini, you might want to...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
She's
still really bright. Yes,
like an angel in the morning. So go watch Venus and say hello. And then Jupiter and Mercury, much dimmer, much lower. Southern hemisphere will have a better view than we do up in the northern hemisphere, but we should see them as well if it's clear. And it's nice to see those beings together. And then gathered, we know at that very powerful degree of the zodiac, where the current day Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, the Bohemian and magical star, projects to about 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius. It's really a triple gathering of powerful beings.
Yeah, right. Yes. So being aware of that, I know that's probably a bit more complicated for many of you who are just beginning astrology or whatever, but again, just be really aware of that. And I think the levels of astrological understanding now do very much incorporate the real sky and what's happening out there. And thanks to people like the agents and yourself.
Yeah, Julija, I wanted to share a little stellarium. I'll do it when you're done with your slides, and I'll show the Scorpion kind of walking the land.
Okay, good. Yeah, so anyway, being aware of that, the Capricorn solstice chart, of course, we're not going to talk too much about that, but I think the biggest sort of image of what we can take for the solstice is Jupiter and Mercury aligned in the same degree in Sagittarius. Although they're not making any other kind of connections in the chart, we've still got the nodes squaring Uranus, which has been a really big story of the last 4 months for all of us, with Venus in connection there and Mars retrograde, Venus retrograde in that lineup with the nodes and Uranus. And that story continues for the next few months. So you know, gather the changes with the big ideas that are, you know, in your life at the moment, sort of take them on in perhaps a brave way, and taking that story of the forging of the fire in Sagittarius with these two there. I think we're kind of in that space of, let's say, reforging a few things in our lives, okay? So don't be scared of what's ahead. And of course, it's followed by a full moon in Cancer. That doesn't happen very often, to have this, you know, on the solstice day, a full moon in Cancer. That really brings in our sort of need for taking on responsibility for our needs, and for others' needs. You know, not blaming others for what we haven't got or what we have, you know. So really, you know, working with that and embracing a lot more to come with you in that process. I just want to quickly promote CIA and what's coming up for us. And today, a special for the membership, or I'll keep it open till the new year, I think, to join our membership at the old prices, let's say. Have a look what we've got coming up. We have 2 webinars a month with amazing astrologers like these guys that we're on today. We've got Nadia Shah coming up talking about the lunar nodes and their sort of presence and eclipses in 2019, followed by Andrew Smith with his take on the main aspects of 2019, and then Hakan Kirkoglu from Turkey, who has done a lot of work with prenatal eclipses. So if you don't know much about how to work with your prenatal eclipses, Hakan is the man. So anyway, keep that code for anyone that sees this webinar, so that you can log in to amazing, constant, let's say, information, and learn a lot of astrology on the way. If you begin that, you can begin astrology lessons straight away with us. So happy solstice to all, and we're going to get Gemini to show us the walkings of, what is it?
Of the Scorpion on the land. I'm so excited about all of those webinars you just shared, Julija.
Yes, agents and members get all of that for free. You can log into, let's say, purchase the one-offs, but they're $25 each, whereas when you pay for a whole year, it's actually $15 a month, which is 2 great webinars for $7.50, and there's archives. There's a whole lot of archives. So if you like learning with us, really do consider joining the CIA.
And it's a gift you can give to the goddess astrology this year. Supporting astrologers, supporting astrology is a wonderful way to give back and to promote the expansion of this cosmic intelligence. So do it. All right, I'm just going to share a quick stellarium image and animation. So this is cast for Berkeley, California, where I'm currently sitting. I'm looking north. This is North Star. An interesting thing to know is that the altitude to the pole star equals your latitude on Earth. So I'm currently sitting at like about the same latitudes as like Athens, Greece, about 38 degrees north. And so the pole star will be 38 degrees above. Julija is sitting at about 37 degrees south latitude, right, Julija? Mm-hmm. Right. So the North Star is going to be 37 degrees below the horizon. In other words, that's not seen in the southern hemisphere. The south pole space would be. But if I turn now and we look south, we'll see Sirius here that Olga was speaking about, the brightest star of our sky. And I love the idea that Sirius is at the top of the tree, because in the northern hemisphere, and the further north you go, the lower Sirius gets to the ground. And so it will literally light up the tops of the trees. I've seen that many times and spoken about it as like a Christmas star in the past. Here's Venus. This is 3:45 a.m. on December 21st, tomorrow on Solstice Day. And so I'll just move through time here, and we'll see Venus rising and the scales following her. And then we'll see Mercury and Jupiter co-rise, and they're very close together, as you can see, and they're very strongly aligned to the heart of the Scorpion, Antares. Well, look at how the Scorpion just walks the land here in the northern hemisphere. A little further north, even more so, like in Hawaii, they call it Maui's fishhook. that he pulled the islands out of the water with, because it rises very vertically like that. But if you get up into like the Nordic realms or London, you'll see that this sleigh just walks on the land during the course of the night. And I love that image that you brought forth, Julija. So many ways to pet the cosmic cat, as always. So many stellar stories written in the heavens, and may we always continue to tune into them and share them with one another.
Yeah, and watch them. Look at them, for yourself. Actually, in Australia, I have to go out and watch more, but Scorpio rises on its side, and it's enormous at certain times of the year, right? Enormous. And then it dives into the west, the end of the tail looks like a horse's head. So this is from our latitude. So, the things to remember is, different latitudes, different places, like the Australian Aboriginals, or one group of them saw Scorpio as a canoe, that, one of the heroes would be, kind of riding around in a canoe. And, again, many, many stories. There's no scorpions in Lithuania. So, no doubt, that's the reindeer horn. So we can all see those images in all of that as well. So anyway, we better let you all go. It's been wonderful. It's great to see you, Gemini. I miss you.
We'll talk about the chart another time, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Olga, 33, thanks for being here. Hang on, you're muted, I think.
No, she's unmuted on the other. We can hear her.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, there you are. Thanks, Olga. I hope you all have and thanks to Steph, who had to go, babysitting duties, grandmother duties. Thank you to all of you for being online. Thank you to all of our friends that were on the webinar, and to all of you that see this on Facebook or YouTube. Will be loaded up as well. So happy cosmic solstice. I hope these stories have enlightened the journey for all of us and what we're living in right now. So be good, be gentle, and be wise. We'll see you next
time. Hug a tree, friends.
Bye.
Let it live.
See you, Brett.
Bye, Olga.